Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Doom Mod Madness. This time around, we are checking out the HXRTC Project. This is yet another entry into the pantheon of randomizer mods available for Doom, and it does a lot of the things you'd expect a randomizer mod to do. For example, it's got a vastly expanded roster of enemies and weapons, and much as the category implies, a randomizer mod will randomly sprinkle them around a level each time you load it up. As a result, it's going to unbalance the absolute hell out of the vast majority of maps. So sometimes it's going to be a little tricky to find a map that fits the bill for this kind of gameplay, and in that respect, I'm currently playing this on Slaughterfest 2012, which seems to work quite well with it. So what is it about this particular mod that sets it apart from the crowd? Well, for one, there's a bunch of gameplay mechanics at work here that elevate it above the usual surface level shenanigans you'd normally expect. Firstly, we have the shop droids here, which can occasionally spawn on the site of your fallen enemies and will offer you something in return for cash. What exactly they will offer you, much like the rest of the stuff here in this mod, is randomized. As a result, not everything sold by the shop droids will be immediately useful. In fact, not everything sold by the shop droids will be immediately affordable, especially if you're playing on a more conservative map set. A good reason for me to pick this particular map is because it's chock full of enemies, and enemies drop money. Complicating matters somewhat is the fact that different kinds of enemy will drop different kinds of money, be it coins, jewels, bags of money, piles of cash, all sorts of bits and pieces, and to be honest, trying to figure out what kind of enemy drops what kind of money would require an Excel spreadsheet to figure out. It's not really necessary, if I'm going to be honest. Also, they drop mystery boxes. That one had a bat in it. Let's kill it. It's clearly evil. Another element that helps HXRTC stand out is that there's a leveling up mechanic at play here. One that increases your max HP, your attack stat, and your defensive stat as well, and it's a welcome inclusion, especially when you consider the sheer amount of chaotic variety that you'll be up against during the course of an average map set here. Leveling up itself is done through the acquisition of experience points, and it's acquired much in the same manner that you acquire money. You kill enemies. You kill lots of them, but only this time you don't have to collect the coins off the ground. The EXP gain is handled automatically. Though it may sound a little complex, these elements don't really ever get in the way of the core gameplay here in HXRTC. At its heart, it is all about the stuff that you love most in randomizer mods, and that's about killing a huge variety of enemies with a huge variety of weaponry. That said, I shouldn't forget about Rage Mode. There's a meter at the bottom left that accumulates when you take hits, and when it fills, Rage Mode automatically deploys, and I seem to always activate it after I've killed everything in the room. Oh well. So, I guess I've stalled for long enough. It's time to talk about the weaponry you can get your hands on here in HXRTC, and the tricky thing about that is that there are 10 categories of weapons here, and the vast majority of them consist of 5 weapons per category. So to keep this a little bit more manageable, I'm going to be focusing more on the weapons that I've enjoyed the most. And the Gatling laser gun here certainly fits that particular bill. It's got a pretty satisfying primary, and its secondary has a really nice bit of sound design as well. It's going to be tricky to pick up here in the video, but you should definitely try it out for yourself just to listen to that wind-up noise before you can unleash the secondary fire mode. You may have also noticed the occasional use of a pew-pew laser pistol here in HXRTC, and that's pretty much the default pistol weapon of this mod, something that's designed to help you conserve ammo against smaller fry, so you can use heftier weapons, such as this one, against bigger fry, such as the Cyber Demon here. Unfortunately, this seems to be a technique I'm not really that great at utilizing, hence my reliance on shotguns at this point, because I've kind of chewed through all of the ammo for all of the heftier stuff. But the reason why I'm going to all the trouble to take this thing down is because something interesting happens when you finally kill a Cyber Demon. You get a big fat mystery box.
Oh shit, what's in the box, Icarus?
Guns. Lots of guns. And a spray can. Full of poison. Because, obviously. Actually, the spray can's pretty good. It's pretty effective. We've also got a Saturn V rocket launcher here, and an old favorite of mine, a black hole maker. Because let's face it, nothing says screw you quite like a black hole to the face. Now, some weapons in HXRTC can only be acquired by defeating the enemy that wields it. For example, there's an enemy called the Evil Warrior that has a shield, and you can pick up that shield, use it to fire projectiles, and in some cases reflect projectiles back against the enemy that fired it. Unfortunately, it does not work with rockets. A shame, I know. In terms of other weapons I've encountered here so far that fit into that category, we've also got the standard Revenant shoulder launchers, which come in standard and laser variety, not to mention the Mancubus launchers as well, which come in flame and ice. The flame coming with a nifty secondary that seems to fling boulders at your enemies, which seems to factor into the elemental properties of some of the enemies and weapons here in HXRTC. That's something that I'll definitely get into in a moment, but for now, I'm going to show you a loot box that turns into a special enemy type. Because this is a thing that can happen. I mean, it's obvious, really. So something that intrigued me during my time with HXRTC was the fact that certain enemies, along with certain weapons, seem to display elemental properties. For example, they seem to revolve around fire, ice, stone, and electricity, which is an unconventional mix. But what intrigued me further was whether the appropriate weapon would deal additional damage against the opposite themed enemy. For example, using a fire weapon against an ice enemy, would that result in a quicker enemy death? But unfortunately, the style of maps that I was playing on here proved a little too chaotic for me to truly figure out whether that was in fact the case. There's also an additional type that pops up during gameplay in both enemy and weapon variety, and that would be poison type. There's a few weapons such as the spray can, which you might have seen earlier, and blow dart as well, which I assume does deal damage over time when it hits an enemy. But as I mentioned earlier, you'll barely have time to pay attention to such things, especially on map sets such as this one. All you can really do is pick the biggest cannon you've got in your arsenal and let her rip. In fact, HXRTC is certainly at its best when it allows you to do that, and I'm grateful that it also includes things like a ridiculous amount of overhealth in order to help facilitate that. You may notice right now my health is sitting somewhere above 1,000. Now, as best as I can tell, that is down to the various power-ups that you can acquire through killing enemies or by opening various mystery boxes that they drop, and I'd love to be able to tell you what each and every one of them does, but there's just too many for me to go through, especially while dealing with killing all of these enemies at the same time. I mean, there's soul spheres, there's divine soul spheres, there's alpha spheres, there's delta spheres, and even though I haven't come across it yet, there's probably an omega sphere kicking around somewhere. All I know is it's usually a good idea to pick them up regardless. I think one of the things I like most about HXRTC is that despite on the surface looking like an utter chaotic clusterfuck, it actually turns out to be a pretty well-structured clusterfuck. Well, that's of course once you've found a map that actually plays well with it, because, believe me, this can turn the first levels of certain map packs into an absolute living hell. I remember getting tremendously frustrated just trying to give this a go with something like Speed of Doom, for example, but once you get over that initial hurdle, you'll find that the mechanics at play here do serve to enhance the typical randomizer experience that you may have come to expect. The leveling system, while admittedly simple, does add a nice sense of progression to the maps as you make your way through them, and the fact that they boost your stats in the process certainly doesn't hurt. I'm also a big fan of how this mod utilizes mystery boxes, especially when it comes to doling out some of the higher tier weapons. Normally I find in certain randomizer mods that you're just endlessly wandering around, crossing your fingers and hoping that on the designated weapon drop you'll see that big juicy gun you've been hoping for, but the way bosses operate here means that the box they drop has a pretty good chance of having what you're after. The smaller mystery boxes work pretty well too, adding a little bit of spice to the proceedings, what with the chance of having an enemy inside as well as a useful power-up. But ultimately, I've had quite a lot of fun with HXRTC, and I'm gonna have a whole lot more because, if I'm gonna be honest, I've not had quite as much time as I'd like to delve through all of the things that it has to offer, so if I've missed a few things during the course of this video, I apologize. This is usually what happens with randomizer style mods. There's just so much content that I occasionally develop a nosebleed trying to cover as many points as I can. I mean, I haven't even gotten to the inventory items as well. You've got special items that can push enemy hordes away from you if things get too overwhelming. You've got the standard health backpack, which you can probably see on the bar in the bottom right, just next to the Doom Guy face. You've got teleporter items that will take you back to the start of a level, get you out of trouble in a pinch. There's even prism talismans that will give you all of the keys for the doors on a level, and what the hell? This Sawblade just murdered the ever-loving crap out of a cyber demon. I have no idea how that happened. I'm not gonna complain about it either, but what the hell? So yeah, that's pretty much HXRTC for you. A tremendously fun, tremendously chaotic mod, and of course my loot box would turn into a monster. That's just par the course at this point. But in any case, if you're interested in giving this mod a whirl for yourself, the link, as usual, is in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, and feel free to suggest any mod you'd like to see me cover in future episodes of Doom Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.